Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel, The High Future. I'm going to introduce some concepts to you, some things I extracted from the religions. It's really the philosophy of existence and prescribed duties. But what I did was I aggregated sort of what I learned from all the different religions. So the divine intelligence is represented in multiple ways across multiple faiths. In Christianity, the Holy Spirit; in Islam, Allah; in Judaism, Yahweh; Buddhism, the Logos; Tibetan Buddhism, the Great Perfection; Taoism, the 10,000 Things; the Native American spiritual traditions, the Great Mystery, Brahma's Day. There's a whole bunch of different ones. And what they're actually talking about, I call it the Creator's Dream Cloud. What they're talking about is a massive intelligence field that you're related to in a self-similar way through a fractalization process and a holographic process as well. And the idea is the moment the original thought occurs, boom, the information for everything comes into being, like the surface of this DVD. So we can see the information for the movie, but we can't see the movie. We need a dynamic between space and light to bring up an image. So the concept's really very similar, but instead of it just being one DVD, so this would be one singular universe, it's actually a bunch, and all of it comes together sort of like a cloud. And then you're existing inside that cloud, and you're making choices about what you want to do with yourself. And that's sort of what spirituality is talking about, because this divine intelligence is related to you in a dynamic way, and you can cultivate a personal relationship with it, and it has an aim and intent for you because you have a soul. And then the relationship to your soul, to Creator, is it's a fractaling process. So the way to think of fractal is the cell in your body, that you have a little cell and you can extract it from your body, but it's still you. It contains your DNA. It has organelles that all carry the same cellular function, that carry the same organelle function that you do. And then in those cells, it's sort of a little processing unit that is a fractal of you. And the same concept applies to you in this massive intelligence. And you're inside of it as a fractal, so you possess soul and you have a mind. And your consciousness is both intelligent and infinite, as well as Creator's. So that's the interconnectedness you have to everything else, and it's sort of like that's what's actually mattering to Creator is the feelings. So it's like that cell in your body. Does the cell in your body know about the bills you have to pay? No. Does it know how you feel? Yes. Right? So the same concept is with Creator in detail. So the detail is the infinite portion of Creator, and then the finite portion is the cellular part, believe it or not. It's the growth, the learning. It has an aim and intent. So from your perception of existence, well, wow, anything's possible. But actually, from Creator's perspective, it only looks that way to you. It has a plan, and an aim and intent for your soul. And then that's what the spirituality is about, is cultivating the soul. And then in the religions, there's prescribed duties. And those are behavioral modalities that if you follow, then there's a possibility of you being able to connect with this divine consciousness and then having a more prosperous, beneficial life in the way of your cellular development. Excuse me. And that has to do with like making choices, right? So the idea is that you have a biology, and your biology has thoughts and feelings that you move through, and that actually that's the part that matters, and it's almost like the reality and matter organizes around that. And then all these different things are playing parts in your life, but it's aimed at your growth, and everything around you is reflecting to you what your lessons are ultimately. And then that would be what's in the religions is the spiritual science of self in the Bhagavad Gita, or jihad in Islam, right? And jihad is a part of its self work, right? So what's happened in the Middle Eastern territories is that there's been occupation via colonial factors, and then intelligence agencies in there causing all kinds of trouble. And as a result, that portion of Islam is missed, that it's actually self-work and standing up to evil, right? And not going along with it is part of the duties. But we can get into that at a future point. But one of the things that it's about is the choice making. So in order to access the information from the higher density fields, you have to do your work in the present moment the right way. So that's the foods you consume, the things you think about, the things you talk about, right? The words coming out of your mouth, what you drink, and then how you treat others. So if you follow certain principles in how you do this, then what happens is you raise up to a higher vibration, and then those subtle frequencies of intelligence that wouldn't be available to you if you were, saying drinking alcohol regularly or consuming junk food constantly, the fields aren't available to you. So your biology is something that you attenuate by how you do your present moment. And then that ultimately is what the religions are about. And then there's different pathways and patterns you can follow to attain these different states. And then in them is all kinds of recommendations on how you do it, and then people that have done it before you. And then when people suggest that these religions are man-made, that's not true at all, because humans aren't existing naturally. We've come up into being inside an experiment. That's why we have this knowledge here. And then the experiment began with the ancients, so they live on planet Venus. They would be Ra or Vivaswan from myths and religions, the archangels from the Western faith's lexicon. And they evolved first. So the way you think about the galaxy is you're a fractal of it. So the way that you have infancy, toddler, child, adolescent, teenager, on, the galaxy goes through its own growth phases. And at the beginning of the galaxy, after it completes an infancy stage, it roils up life, and that comes to consciousness and awareness. And then the nature of that whole cycle is like a toddler era for the galaxy. So when you're a toddler, it's easy to see all as one, and the emotional states that are involved. For their development, they reach these high benevolent states naturally, and the themes they explored in their era aren't the same themes we're exploring now. They didn't have the same complexity and understanding and the same masculine sort of energy. It's more of a feminine dominant era, and they do their work in a way that allows them to transcend to these higher planes of existence, and then they are sort of existing there, supervising what's going on in the galaxy as like guardians, and we would understand them as these angelic forces. And they did their present moment in such a way that they came up with these amazing technologies that would be wondrous. They would be almost magical to us, and they left them around our galaxy. And as their era ended and they transcended to the higher planes, they left a barrier encapsulating the local star cluster. And then that allowed a natural evolutionary path from the beginning of the galaxy all the way up to our era. And the way to think of those eras is like dreaming. So you go through stages of dreaming where it's like various brain states, and then you hit REM sleep, and that's when you have your active dreaming. Well, that's sort of like the galactic mind doing the same thing, that it roils up an era, almost like a dream, and it goes through long periods of evolution until it hits a REM sleep, and then everybody comes up into being in consciousness and awareness, and they do their work, and then that era closes, and then there's long periods of nothingness, and evolution starts again, and then we get up to the next REM cycle, and then that is like the way your brain is. So you have your reptilian brain, right, and then your old mammalian brain, and then your neocortex, and then your prefrontal cortex, and each brain structure is built on the next. Well, the same thing is with the galactic mind and cycles. Each cycle is built out of the learning of the past and is a reflection of the light of consciousness. And that's sort of how the creation works, is it processes the soul and then places it into positions uh, based on its learning, so position of existence and perception. So you might not be able to perceive and understand some things that I'm saying, but that's because of the cellular growth. You have to have the learning in the information field, the pre-processed sort of information as you're going along and doing these incarnations. And then the nature of the experiment brought us up into being, and the beings from Pleiades came from their system. They emigrated to our system and they colonized Tiamat, Phaeton, or Electra. That is now the asteroid belt, and their moon was Maldek, Mars, or Marduk. And those planets are a part of our ancient religions and some of their stories of what was going on here. And the barrier that Ra group left up is mentioned in some of these ancient myths as well. And what ended up happening was those Manus were given the transcendental knowledge, or Islam, from Ra group. So they would be the first Muslims. They could see their the creation from their perspective, and they came to understand Allah, the Logos, the Holy Spirit. They came to understand it in a very, very profound way, and they relay their perception from time to time to other races. And one of these relays was done to Manus, and they used that knowledge and spurred a massive golden era, and then they fell. And in their process of falling, they came to Earth twice, once 500,000 years ago, and again 55,000 years ago. And then we're at the tail end of that remnant. And when they came to Earth, there was a benevolent surface experiment being had by the Elohim, or the Shiny Ones, Danu, Mother Earth, and the archangels, and they're various, not just Ra group, but other high density beings that would be categorized in that level. And they were having this benevolent ascension experiment, and it was a feminine dominant experiment, and they were following behavioral modalities very similar to what Native Americans were living in Cuba when Columbus arrived. There was no real violence, weapons, things like that, a high degree of loving service. And there reaches a point where they can't hold guardianship over their experiment. They're not allowed to protect it due to the light in the cycle. And when that time came, Manu's fallen guardians crash landed into the surface, and they took the existing experiment and they slowly manipulated it, and they broke it into variants. That's in the Quran, it's in the Bhagavad Gita. And then they organized people into castes, and then they promoted a group above everybody else that was supposed to be their group of humans. And what they were doing was hoaxing a surface population and then managing it secretively from Antarctica. And they did that to set the conditions to insert their chosen one. It was the Wanderer from Ra group. So because Ra group put up this barrier and brought them up into being, and then entangled them with the transcendental knowledge, and they fell. In order to make up for that, they gave them their newborn soul. So that's the newborn soul of the archangels, or Lucifer. And then they hoax the surface population to insert their chosen one. That's Thor, Matsya, or Osiris, with the Kamudaki, the Djed, or Molamir, the weapon that was created for them. And then they had the chosen one ceremony, knowing that that was going to be their guy. And the reason why they were doing this was to set the conditions in order to bring the person to be. So the way that this information came to us was through that. And they talk about how it's, there's things in there that are very profound in the religions. Indra's web and Allah's lamp, they talk about a holographic fractal. So in the dewdrop, there's a spider web filled with dewdrops, and in the one dewdrop is a reflection of all the other dewdrops, and in all the other dewdrops is the reflection of the one. Right? So that's us, and we're created in the Creator's image. And then there is Allah's lamp, the same concept. There's a central light, and reflecting out is producing all these other central lights, and the central light is all these other fractal lights are a reflection of that central light. And the way we can understand how that's applying to the soul is it's one singular soul, because at the beginning, what does Creator have to create from other than itself? It doesn't have anything else. So Creator creates from itself. And as the Creator creates, it creates everything from it. So our consciousness and awareness and our soul are a part of the unity field. And the way that the Creator manages things is patterns of self-similarity. So it sets its environment with its governing principles, cosmic law, karmic law, natural law, and then it allows its own self-learning. And if I do this, then that, and then molecules roil up, and then, matter eventually beingness. But all of it is encapsulated into a singular field that follows self-similarity. So the snowflake is a perfect example. We know that the snowflake is a similar pattern that doesn't repeat, and it's always changing. And you think, wow, that's one Earth. All that snowflakes. Then think about the star system, the galaxies. It's so much information. How can it manage it? Well, easy. The properties of water are a singular field, and the information for a snowflake is in a central field, and then all snowflakes are a fractal fragment reflection of the one. And that's this concept for consciousness and awareness and soul. And that's in your religions. So all this information is not man-made, and the religions are coming from otherworldly beings that are having this experiment with us. And the Manus, fallen guardians of the transcendental knowledge, or Islam, came to Earth and, took a unity ascension experiment and fragmented it into variants and hoaxed a golden era. And their chosen one plunged it into the darkness by opening the portal to the dark dimension in the Garden of Eden. And this precipitated out the waveform, an electromagnetic entity, to come into the Earth and then infect the Earth. And then what ends up happening after Earth is infected is that this malevolent intelligence field remains and gets people over and over again as they're following the path of souls, and it keeps people entangled and keeps reoccurring disasters. So we had the fall and the flood of 24,500 years ago precipitate out the 200, which occurred about 14,000 years ago, and then around 1200, or maybe about that, maybe around 12,500 years ago, we had another flood that wiped that era clean, but they established bloodlines that made it through to our era. And then we went through another precipitous fall downwards until we reached about 6,000 years ago. And then that's when you have the insertion of the Babylonians and the Jews into the surface experiment and the introduction of the Old Testament. That's why it says God created the universe 6,000 years ago. It wasn't. It was a pre-existing experiment. And when these people were inserted, we had a group of people that were aware of malevolent rituals in order to access malevolent forces that had reopened that portal to the dark dimension in the Garden of Eden. And that's where we're at. So the reason why I'm able to, relay this information is because of my own self-work. I was doing my own self-work coming out of military service. I was exposed to these secret space programs. And after my exposure to them, I had a subsequent trauma-based mind control op on me for about 13 years that ended with a biblical event at my house, the Revelations. So that's what's at the end of this video. If you want to learn more about spirituality, secret space programs, and self-work, and how to apply it, and also how to stand up to evil, come check out my channel.